Hi, hello. I'm Simon King. This is Nature Space with Haith. And today I'm with Dr. Kevin Eatwell. Kevin's the veterinary specialist and management committee member of the UK Budgerigar Club. Should we say UKBC? Would that be helpful to us both?
I think so. Stick with that. That's what we're known as. Do that. It's much quicker.
Brilliant. So Kevin Eatwell, Kevin's the veterinary specialist of the UKBC. And welcome today, Kevin. It's nice of you to put some time aside for us. And I'm really hoping we can have a good chat about the UKBC. But would it be okay with you if we can first find out a little bit more about yourself? Because I know being a vet must be incredibly interesting. And in particular, can you tell us everything we need to know in a few moments about you and what it takes to be a vet these days?
Oh, gosh. Right. Okay. That's a big question. Okay. So I graduated with honours in 1995 from Bristol. But at that point, my brother was actually in the pet trade at that point, and we had loads of birds and all sorts of stuff. I was breeding sort of soft bills, actually, as it happened. Had some first UK breedings, won some awards from the clubs around that time. Mostly Asian African passerines. I was keeping soft bills. So I had an interest anyway. Graduated around that time. Went into work, and of course, too busy to keep the birds. So the passerines had to go, which is a real shame because a lot of the species I kept obviously are no longer available in captivity, or in the zoos for that matter, some of them. And we always had budgies at that time as well. My dad was a big budgie breeder, and when I started out, I was breeding the budgies to earn some money to pay for the live feed for the soft bills, to be honest. So the budgies we'll talk about budgies in due course, I guess, but that sort of just went off from there. But yeah, so I went through vet school, having an interest in birds. Then when I graduated in 1995, I just started going into general practice, as general practice vet would do, dog and cat. And obviously people I knew was interested in birds, so I was starting to see a few birds as well. And for my sins, the practice I was with was the first practice in the UK to open in a pet superstore. So this was back in the sort of late 90s, which obviously at that time was like, oh my God, you mean a vet isn't in charge of a veterinary business? How does that work? This is sort of like the opening door for corporates to look where we are now. So I guess one of my claims to fame is being the first vet to work in a pet superstore, and that was at PetSmart in Swindon, which was their flagship store at the time. And so, of course, all these other stuff started to come in, all other birds, all mammals, or reptiles, everything started to pile in because, they were buying them from the pet shop. And, back in the 90s, we weren't perhaps so well-educated or well-educating the owners at that time. So all this stuff started to come in. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So I thought, well, I better brush up my game here a bit. So I took a postgraduate exam, which I passed in 2001. Which was basically the Royal College certificate in exotics. And obviously saw more and more, gradually increased the numbers there. And then basically I moved then from Swindon up to Cheshire and worked with a practice that was doing probably 60, 70, 80% exotics. We had about 5 zoos on the books, doing lots of pathology bits and pieces as well. I got my Royal College diploma while I was there and became a Royal College specialist. And then I moved to the university, what will be 15 years ago now, where I became a European College specialist as well, and had another board certification from the European College. And then I've been involved in training and teaching and knowledge transfer ever since, I guess. Although obviously the bulk of my time is still clinically active, dealing now or leading now an exotics referral practice. So we're doing high-end stuff in all the birds, reptiles, small mammals, zoo species, wildlife, whatever, really, basically. So that's my career in a short summary for you. So, yeah.
You've glossed over quite a lot there, I imagine. It's all whirring through your mind now. But interestingly, if I can pick up on that knowledge transfer, because that's what we'll be talking about a little bit more in a few moments, really, because I want to come on, if I can, to, what your role is as a vet within the UKBC, because I think, we talked before I pressed record about this massive education gap that, is one of the things that you want to achieve. But I think perhaps, before we do that, let's talk about what the UKBC is, if we can. So when I look on the website and from conversations with with members. I'm told it's the place to learn, grow, educate, and have fun. And specifically with other budgie keepers, and that's what I think the UK Budgerigar Club is about. Is that right? Am I on the right path?
You're bang on the right path. I mean, having been involved with budgies since I was obviously a small kid, and at that time my dad was breeding exhibition style birds. I preferred the crested and recessive pies, all variety of colours, which I still do. But obviously over the course of my career, we're seeing the sharp end of poor husbandry, if that makes sense. And that could be any species we're dealing with. I've dealt with lots of clubs and societies over the years, and you do have, I guess there's two aspects to it. On the one side, you've got the experienced breeders who think they know what they're talking about, and there's lots of misinformation, old wives' tales, and, to be honest, poor or negligent advice being given on that side of it. And obviously that's something which to me is like just stop trying to pretend you know something when you don't. Then you have a lot of people in the middle who have no education. They just have no resources or no ability to do that. And I guess for me, when I came back into the hobby and I was looking at, I guess, how the Budgerigar fancy had contracted so massively, I was like, well, there's just a massive gap here where there's people that clearly love their birds and want to engage with them and do the best for them, and they're not being catered for. And one of the parallels that I draw when we look at this sort of thing is, you go back 20, 30 years, it was all the people that were breeding and exhibiting, that the people that were, the clubs were all focusing around that. And you look at a lot of small mammal people and breeders now, or anything else, it's all about health and welfare and improving their lot in captivity and how we optimize looking after them. And this is individual people, maybe with one animal, few animals, few pets, breeding in a shed, something like that. The focus now is not about which is the best exhibition bird, it's about how do I care for them properly. So massive educational gap. The resources people are searching for or using are, to be honest, dangerous or negligent in many cases. And that's really where we started to drive, or from my aspect of wanting to get involved with the UKBC, was there's this massive education that we can start hitting here. We can start getting people to apply common sense to diet and simple things that have, I guess, leaked out progressively from what we started doing. I mean, now the chat on all the Facebook groups about budgies having iodine and how much you give and all the rest of it, people have missed and forgotten about iodine for years. And now all of a sudden it's brought back into them and everybody's on about it. It's like, brilliant. I mean, the number of birds, the lives and welfare we've improved just by doing that alone is ginormous. So it's about knowledge. It's about looking after your birds properly, getting advice from the right areas, and also, to some extent, making it economic, because a lot of your people that are giving you advice, they're after making money out of you. They're not after just giving you the advice.
So that's interesting. So there's a change there that you allude to, which is this change from exhibiting budgies, and now we're turning into this different cycle of, how do we concentrate more on their health, their hygiene, their longevity, perhaps.
Yep.
How can we get them to live the maximum lifespan that they potentially can? So how can we do that? And how are you delivering? Because you mentioned also about it's as dangerous and perhaps negligent. And this, I suppose, is this problem that we have not just with bird welfare, but with welfare or anything generally. Google it and so on. But that information is, we don't know whether it's been, I suppose, in the scientific world, we would, potentially it's been peer reviewed, it's in a book and so on. So we know it's gone through a process that people can rely on that information. Actually, at the time it went to press, that was correct. And in terms of Google, then are you saying that who's policing it? Who's policing this information? So therefore it's there, but it may be that you it's a bit like MOT in your own car in a way.
Yes. I wouldn't do that.
And neither would I.
You're bang on right. It's that the information is not being policed, and it's impossible to police, and you can't do that. And because it's online, there's no comeback. There's no, comeback to that. And I guess that's the problem we have in, I suppose, a good thing and a bad thing. But what it means is that some of the resources aren't trustworthy, and you need someone who's in a position to filter that, if you like. And that's the same as your car having its MOT. I don't know anything about cars. I'll need someone who knows something about cars to tell me which exhaust to buy, because I don't know. I just picked one that seemed to be the right one. So you need someone to filter that information, but then it's also drilling down to get the pertinent information across that is practically useful. So online is great. You don't need books, you don't need to travel, you don't need to go to meetings and things like that, which, okay, I appreciate people like the social aspect, perhaps, of face-to-face meetings. But in the current economic climate and with COVID, it's forced us to jump forward into me doing a podcast with you versus turning up in a little village hall around the corner chatting about stuff. Your impact in terms of the number of people you can reach is far greater. And it's pretty much carbon neutral, I guess. I mean, I haven't had to travel anywhere. So, it opens up a wealth of opportunities for us to do that. And the UKBC basically is what we're pitching as. It's a learning platform and a trustworthy learning platform. And certainly on one of the Facebook groups that we do, for example, which is on the health, then that's completely moderated by me. So there's nothing that gets on there that is, old misinformation.
Terrific. So that filtering that you talked about is, I suppose, that's probably part of your role. Obviously, there's a management committee role as well, but part of your role as a vet really is to filter that information so that people can, if as a community people are sharing information, perhaps that's when you can come in and say, well, okay, that's interesting, but perhaps here's another way of looking at this, and here's what science might say. So this filtering starts to show a way, a path. And how either the exhibitionists or people who breed budgies can migrate from this kind of the things that we were more possibly interested in. And maybe there are a lot of people who are still interested in what is the perfect budgie, what is the perfect bird, what should an exhibition bird look like, and that's a good question, really. I mean, where do you stand on that? Do you think that? When I've, is it for me? A bird's got to be healthy foremost. It's got to fly. It's got to, and so on. But obviously, some of this is about the ideal, what a bird should look like from an exhibition perspective. And I suppose you'll have seen the same across the entire pet industry, I imagine. Particularly
dogs, brachycephalic rabbits. I mean, you look at, I'm not going to say too much, but let's have a look at some of the canary varieties out there and their anatomical changes. For example, we could go on and on and on. I think for me, the exhibition side of it, the birds are getting a bit extreme. And there's a very limited number of people now that are they're a minority of the people in that sort of section. There are a lot of people in the middle section who are breeding budgies because they're beautiful and they love the colours and they love the mutations, they love the varieties, and they want to look after them. And these, instead of just being a ring number, these are animals that they really are quite invested in. Okay, maybe they haven't got the money to spend on them commercially individually, but they are invested in them much more. And those people in that middle ground who aren't breeding pets, because these aren't pets, but these are birds of certain colours or varieties that they like, and they want to get a certain colour combination. A lot of those birds in that category, the hobbyist breeder, let's call them that, they're still interested in exhibition budgies, but they're sort of looking at birds probably more around the standard of 20 years ago that still had a nice outline, nice feathers, could fly and do all the things they could do, and they're not being catered for. And these people are I guess one of the target audiences that we're looking at is learning about genetics and how to breed them and this sort of type of thing, how to keep them healthy, what to do with fostering of eggs and what colour combinations do you put together. There's such a wealth of education that we can give to them too. So it's the whole package really, from advising an individual pet owner on the appropriate toys and care and diet and nutrition and this sort of type thing, through to when is your bird sick, when does it need to see a vet, what things should you be doing at home, right through to how you're going to design and build an aviary, or going through to breeding certain colours or varieties, and then obviously on to the exhibition side of it as well. And we have a lot of exhibition breeders too, who, to be thankful actually on the exhibition breeders who are part of the UKBC, are very, very open-minded. some of the closed-minded exhibitors in any fancy, whether we can talk about rabbits if you want, we could talk about dogs or anything else, but you chuck them something that's not that particular pedigree and up to that exhibition standard, and they're just not interested. They can't appreciate how someone would really identify with something that's different to what they identify with. And that's where a lot of people have been sort of just left on their own. And it's like we've brought them in and encouraged them, really. And the community feel that we have, the support, the engagement, the help for, individual people with pet birds at home, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, these people are posting pictures of their budgies running up and down the curtains going, oh my God, look at this, what he's done today. We've got exhibition breeders going, oh my God, that's hilarious. What a beautiful colour he is, this sort of type thing. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
And it's interesting when I speak to budgie keepers, it always reminds me back when I was growing up as a child back in the, I won't say, but we had two budgies, and so my friends have birds as well. I had budgies as well, and do you? And obviously, I'm keen to explore the fact that you are inviting pet budgie keepers to join UKBC as well. And that I'd like to explore that, because is it possible to just keep a single bird, happy, healthy, and so on as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, they become very humanized very quickly and very bonded very quickly. And much as they are colony birds and they do love being in colonies, I guess we do have the issue that as soon as you start getting them a friend, they want to breed. And obviously that has lots of inherent problems as well. And to be honest, most of our pet owners actually do have 2 or 3 or 4. But, you do start getting issues then in terms of them trying to breed or becoming aggressive or wanting to lay eggs, this sort of type of thing. And these are the sort of things that are, I guess, well beyond their knowledge, because unless you want to breed something, you don't expect them to try, if that makes sense. We have the same with the reptiles. So this is where the experience of a breeder that breeds them say, okay, well, this is normal, this isn't normal, this is what you need to do. It can be really helpful. So they are better off with friends. But like I say, if you're having friends that are male and female, then you can encourage breeding in them. And it's a question of dynamics and individual setup and getting advice to make sure that's optimized. So yeah, we have loads of those. And the other side of it, aside the community feel and education, I guess, we haven't really touched on economics too much. And part of what the UKBC wanted to do was to create a very economical club that you could join, which is why it's online, but also giving people the opportunity to get the best diet at a very good price, for example, or get things that mean the hobby becomes more economical versus being a financial burden, particularly in the current times, and directing people to the most economical, but yes, the best way to keep them. And that's really why our association with Haith, for example, has come in terms of the offers you're doing and pushing, brilliant help and support that you've given the UKBC, which long may that continue. Again, these people with these birds that are breeding varieties and colours that aren't exhibition breeders, they still ring all their babies. We got the Bird Ring Company on board. The rings are far superior to any other rings I've seen. Also far more economical, because these aren't things that we're trying to make money out of. This is about getting you on board, getting your money's worth out of it, getting you to learn, improving bird welfare, but enabling people to really engage with their birds and just get enthused and have connection.
Yeah, that connection's in the wild. During lockdown, we talked about people connecting with nature, staying connected with nature. But that must have also been the same for people who were looking after birds in captivity, because they are solely reliant on their owners. But obviously, I think perhaps did you see an increase in the way people, or an increase in the way people talked possibly about their anxieties, their mental health, and probably how much they got back from their birds that they didn't get before? Maybe some people did, and have always known that, and I think that's true for nature, wild free living birds as well. But have you seen or heard people talking more about that connection with the birds?
I think as we're looking and we're moving, like I say, I guess our membership are different. They're not just I just want to breed the best budgie. They're of no interest to me or value as an individual. That's it. I'm not particularly interested in them. The people that we have got keeping and breeding the birds, they're far more invested in them as individuals. So their emotional bond to their birds is far greater, far more meaningful. That has multiple effects. One is, if there's a subtle behavioural change or a difference, they're on it. For me, if you're keeping a large group of birds and you wander in and you find something dead in the aviary, it's like, well, that bird was sick yesterday and you missed it. Or you failed to spot it. So a lot of our owners are engaging much more with them that way. They're much more meaningful, much more valued. So of course they're hand-tamed. They come and sit on your fingers and they chat to you, or they're beautiful colours, or they come out and nibble on your finger. And, that can be people with them in the garden right the way through to people in the house. And yeah, pets are of enormous health, for mental health benefit, for engagement and social, for social engagement for people, whether that be, retired people perhaps living on their own and they've got social engagement, that they can do that. Maybe their mobility is a bit impaired, so they can't walk a dog. Yeah. So we're seeing a massive increase in those people, and it's giving them a resource that they can use to make sure they're looking after their animals properly, but also feel supported. And, if they're on social media, well, then stick up some pictures of your bird doing something funny, and you actually have someone to engage with. And so it is. I'm really, really actually pleased with the numbers of people that we've got. We've got over 400 members now, and the range of members we got is just so beautiful. And these people are, I think we've got a good group of people that are getting progressively educated, progressively more confident and experienced at looking after their birds better. And that's running from across the entire board. And we're doing it on a I guess, a fairly green basis because it's online. There's no real costs involved in that. Well, there is some cost, of course, involved with what we do. But the fact of the matter is we can make it a very, very economical thing. And I had thought about, and this goes back to perhaps me being me, but, for me, for all my time and efforts I put into this, I think if you are putting time and effort into something, it has to be valued, if that makes sense, Simon. And, I've spent a number of years trying to preach to people who don't value what my advice is because, I'm a vet, I don't really know, I don't keep them, this, that, and the other. And you're like, well, actually, if you don't value what I'm offering, then I can't, you can't help everybody with that. And so I guess that's why, to some extent, it's like, no, if you want to be educated, a token gesture is needed because I want you to value what we do, and it's worked very well. And the income we generate from membership fees is just enough to allow us to keep the website running, developing that type of thing, bringing in new software, doing the interviews that we do, or for me, increasing the number of courses and things that will take time to build in and set into the website. So, it's I think it's a very positive thing, and certainly for the members, I think they really do enjoy. But it's the same with any of these things, Simon. It's you've got to put in to get out, and those that are engaging are just getting so much for it. And I think their mental health and their birds' health is clearly so much better for it.
I can see that. And talking about putting data or putting things in, and in this specific. My mind is, as you're talking about data, my mind is worrying because I'm thinking, where are you going to store all this information? So I suppose you've talked about potential courses, we've talked about online. Will there be some sort of data retrieval where people can go online and perhaps put, something, an ailment, and then there'll be a solution that will pop up and so on? Have you been having those kind of conversations?
Not yet, but I think as time, the thing is with any new society, we're there for our members, we're there to serve them to some extent, and we'll evolve in whatever direction they want. They're not going to be told what to do. They're going to be, they can make us do what we want. At the minute, we have obviously our website, which is the default for everybody to go back to. And all the resources are on the website there, available to some open access, others to members. So we've got things like data sheets for all the drugs and medications to make sure you're using the right dose and the right signs for using it, things like that. And in terms of the courses I'm setting up and running, I'm progressively building that resource. So if you want to learn about avian gastric yeast, well, you can just click on the presentation that says avian gastric yeast. And I'm sure as things build, we're going to get to the point that we're going to need to have search functions and things put in there as well. So at the minute, we're still building as we go along, and obviously, it's. And I suppose the other thing from a knowledge transfer point of view, from an education point of view, a lot of the things that we need to get across and educate people about, they're the same. I'll tell somebody that, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, somebody else asks the same question, and I'll tell them the same. And then it happens a month later, and then 2 months later it happens again. And you're like, okay, everybody's asking the same question. So we're now in a position, when you say going back and data searching, if you're on our social media groups and, I've got this as an issue, we go, that's great. Here's the lecture for you. Have a little listen to that one. Here's a data sheet for you. If you want to get X, Y, and Z, this is the company to get it from, this sort of type thing. So we're in a position to basically signpost people back to the website and say, this is this bit here, that question's been covered, here we are, off we go. And obviously that's very efficient in terms of knowledge transfer as well, but it's like, if the information's there, it's done, we just got to direct you to it. And so it's all on the website, all downloadable, or on, like I say, or you get it on your phone. It's just very, very convenient to do it that way. And because there's no building, because there's no fuel, because there's no little church hall meeting needed, we genuinely have an international reach with this. And we do have an international reach. We have a lot of members from overseas that are just brilliant again, and it's just seeing how people keep them differently in different countries and different mutations and things as well. And because it's online, like I say, it's international. And a lot of the stuff that we direct, sites and things we direct people to, they're international. You just ship them over.
Yeah. I like the fact. So the paradox for me, thinking about it, is that the internet, in a way, has become this dangerous place where it's very easy to go down this cul-de-sac of information. You don't know who's written it, who's stored it, who's reviewed it, and so on. And yet we're going to use the same internet, which is brilliant, because we're, as you say, we're chatting now. We're both doing our job. We're both in between a cup of tea and a break and a chat with staff and teams and everything else, which is brilliant, that we can hit record, share this conversation with people, and we haven't notched up those carbon miles. That just doesn't make sense if we're saying that you're a community of people that care about and have your green ethos, which I thought would be nice to know a little bit about that. But I think we've touched on that already. And we're at Haith, we're doing the same. We are reducing and eliminating, almost so there isn't any left, our reliance on single-use plastics. That's where the damage is. On this podcast, we talked to a wonderful chap who locally we call him the Canoe River Cleaner, and he's very humble about what he does, but he does a great job. He takes the plastic out of the river freshly, and actually, although he's very humble about what he does, when we spoke to an explorer who was in charge of the Rothera Antarctic Station in Antarctica, he was talking about plastic pollution and how actually, these plastics are finding their way ultimately into apex predators ourselves, our own diets. So, removing those single-use plastics from our supply, our production chain is key. So without this green ethos, without us saying, well, actually, let's use the best of the internet. It gets a bad rap, and rightly so, but let's use the best of it to bring this community together. And that's why we're excited to be part of. I suppose as a company, we're excited about any community that's going to get together for bird welfare, to help us improve diets, give us feedback, get community members together, create this knowledge transfer, partnership that because potentially, I suppose it's just like being in business. 20% of our of our money, of our revenues, or of our sales will generate around about 80% of what we do as a business. And I guess that's the same, probably, I'm guessing, because it's a principle, probably the same in the bird keeping world. Probably the top 20% of problems will resolve about 80% of the issues. And I mean, if we can, for example, it'd be nice to come onto diet for all.
Yep.
We live and breathe and breathe our health healthy diet, healthy bird. That goes back to 1937 when Ted Haith started Haith. He couldn't find clean seed, and so he found a way of cleaning seed, and the queues became longer for his seed than they did for the Grimsby Zoo that he was the senior curator of. So
yep.
that's where he started. But every time we get lost, and we do get lost, every business gets lost for a moment, don't they? For it might be a day, an hour, a month, and you remind yourself where you've come from, and actually it's those cornerstones, those tenuous of the business that you and that's how you find yourself again. So whenever we get lost, we go back to what we're about, which is about clean seed, healthy diet, healthy bird.
I think
the same.
I think, Simon, what you've got to look at when you're looking at anything really, you want to do the big impactful things you can do that are maybe simple. You do them first. And as you said, in terms of upgrading people's diet, making sure their nutrition is a bit more sound or logic-based, whether they're keeping a pet bird individually or whether they're breeding, this sort of type thing. And that's a fairly easy win, if that makes sense. You tick that box, you have massively upgraded budgerigar welfare by ticking that box. And it's just silly things like, jumping away from seed from it, but it's like silly things like getting the message about iodine out there. It's like, because you go back, everybody was on about iodine in the days of we switched to iodine nibbles, and then we've kind of forgotten about it. All the breeders have forgotten about it. And simply getting the message out there, like, go and get some Lugol's iodine for a tenner off whichever website you like and put a drop in a couple of times a week. Easy. The birds drink it. It's a no-brainer, but a massive, massive increase in welfare and longevity from just one very, very simple change. And of course, if you're doing simple changes that are impactful, and it's, oh my God, this is really good, you can start working on the little nuances then to drive that a bit forward. So in terms of nutrition and, having been involved in the reptiles, mammals, and the birds over the years, and just seeing what the exhibition budgerigar breeders or supposed experts are touting about diet. And it's just ridiculous. It's so complex. It's so over the top. And there's loads of YouTube videos, this is the soft feed I feed to my birds. And you're like, you have no idea what that stuff is, let alone what you're putting it in for. So I think, what I've wanted to do is to try and get simple things that people can do to upgrade diets that are achievable, that are impactful. And you're dead right, and you'll have the two arguments, and I'm going to be honest, because I'll be honest with you, Simon, that a lot of vets are that seed is bad due to its nutritional deficiencies, etc., on that basis. That's why the pelleted food market exists for citizens and things. And obviously, there's loads of those on the market as well. But when you're dealing, I guess, with the market that we're at, you're dealing with birds that are granivorous. They eat seed. That's what they do. That's their most natural dietary resource. And the fact of the matter is everybody's feeding them seed. That's what they do. The pet shops do. The breeders do. So if you're in a situation that seed is being used like that, you want the best quality seed you can do. And from a maintenance diet point of view, from a calorie concentration, from a protein level, that sort of type thing, it maintains birds beautifully. Absolutely maintains them beautifully. So if you go down the route saying, okay, we're going to make this the diet that everybody uses, but we want to make it the best diet we can do, then that's where Haith comes in, because the quality, and has always been known from the budgie fancy as the best, and it is the best. Reducing wastage, etc., all the rest of it, alongside a green ethos. So that's really the message there. Is like, okay, that's what we're going to be doing. But then you're looking at, okay, we know there's deficiencies in seed because we've got monocultures that are being grown. It's not as varied as it would be in the wild. We know there's areas in that seed will be deficient, and it's just simple tweaks and additions to upgrade that. And silly, so simple things like bit of iodine in the water. Iodine's done, ticked, great. Give them an ultraviolet light. You've sorted out vitamin D, tick, great. Two very, very easy fixes without having to go through this whole ridiculous regime of getting 15 different concoctions and risking overdosing something because you don't actually know what you're doing. So I think much as the pelleted diets are there, economics probably prevents people from using them, but also people aren't using them. They're giving seed. So let's do the best that we can in that circumstance. And that's Haith, being honest.
Yeah. Thank you. That's good to hear. But, what I like to do with everybody we've talked to on the podcast really is to kind of challenge ourselves to something. So when we met the Explorer, we thought we're really going to sharpen our pencil here, get rid of everything, and everything that's single-use plastic, just get rid of everything. Because I think we were about 95, 96, a little bit more, perhaps. But it's always that last. It's like, when you watch the exploration films, it's always that last 10% that they lose half of their exploration party and so on. So we didn't want to lose, our appetite for this. And for you've already mentioned, Kevin, the iodine in the water, iodine nibbles and so on have been around since for many moons, haven't they?
Yes.
And are they equally as good, or do you think is it better in the water?
I think the problem that we've got with a lot of the recommendations that people have made regarding iodine or cuttlefish, let's put those two out there in bits and pieces like that. Yeah. It's about birds selectively feeding, or it's about birds being trained to eat a certain food source. And some will take an iodine nibble, some won't take an iodine nibble. It's completely up to what the bird decides. Same with cuttlefish. The beauty of iodine in the water, and the iodine doesn't taint the water at all, so the birds continue to drink it, is because we know they need to drink, they get the iodine. It's probably one of the very few things I recommend that you can put in the water fine. So we know they're getting it. We're bypassing that selective feeding route, which you've got with iodine nibbles or with cuttlefish or however the supplements you're giving. Ultraviolet light's the same. If you've got, there's loads of really beautiful lighting setups you've got for pet birds right the way through to, I have UV lights set up on the back of my shed for the breeding pairs as well. And again, it's that sort of thing. If they're exposed to UV light, they're an Australian diurnal species. They're going to get exposed to a lot of natural UV light. Then that's something else again. If you do that for them, that's another tick box. They're very, very simple solutions, very economical solutions, to be honest, to complement a seed diet. And those two things alone, like I say, getting decent seed, of the right sort of quality that's clean and hygienic. We all know the issues with sort of things like, aspergillus and dust and all sorts of horrible things with that. So if you get that baseline sorted, a couple of little tweaks, and they've got to be simple, because you might have somebody who is a little old lady wanting to do it for their bird. They've got one bird. It's got to be practical. It's got to be sensible. And that's really part of the target we're reaching for here. But obviously these things apply right the way through to the bigger breeders as well. It's like, just make it simple and economical, and a massive difference to it. And I think obviously that also has an impact, and going back to green ethos, is if it's simple and it's not complex, the manufacturing or the this, that, and all the other, and it's just brought back to what's needed, if that makes sense. And that's partly what we're looking for here. Is we want you to have fun with your birds. We want you to enjoy your birds, engage with them, bond with them, love them, look after their health and welfare. And we want you to be able to do that economically, and also ethically, in ethically a sound way. And that includes in the environment as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I like that. And in terms of the iodine, what are the benefits? So how might that? So I that's now in the water for my birds. Why am I doing it? What's the overall benefit?
So one of the things that we do know, and this is why iodine nibbles and things were brought about, I guess, and even before iodine nibbles were brought about, is one of the things you get with birds that are on seed diets is they get deficient in iodine. And we know that's just the nature of the captive diet that we've got them on. And that used to be quite a big problem. You used to get loads of birds. Well, when I first graduated, they'd all the pet birds would come in squeaking because their thyroid glands, which are around the windpipe, increase in size, and they make this little sort of. Once you've heard it, you've heard it and you know it. Do you know what I mean? It's almost that sort of thing. You go, oh, I know what that is. Used to be very, very common. And at that time, we used to just use vanadine, which is some of the old iodophore disinfectants at the time that people were using a lot of. Used to be putting the iodine-based disinfectant in the water. That's what you used to do because that's what you had, and it obviously solved the problem. And then I think from then on, obviously people went, I give them iodine nibbles, this sort of type thing, and maybe that dropped off the list, and people didn't really think about it so much. Yeah. But certainly, I think probably in the last 5-10 years, even coming through from the veterinary side and seeing birds with respiratory signs, and I think with the younger generation of vets coming through, who maybe don't have I guess they don't have the experience of the days of yore with really horrible husbandry and all the rest of it that I maybe have had. These things are being missed. They're all going, have antibiotics, this, that, and all the other for respiratory infections and stuff. And it's like, well, actually, just give it some iodine and see what happens. I mean, obviously, iodine, if it is an iodine deficiency, literally 3-4 days, but it's so much better. You've literally, it's a diagnosis by response to treatment. So, I think sometimes things do go full circle. And, one of the other things that we've got added for the breeders really more than the pet owners, but is cod liver oil, for example. And this is just something else that fascinates me, actually, Simon. It's because we always used to use it, but then people just stopped using it. And, the vitamin A content, which we know will help deal with the issues with perhaps some of the deficiencies we see with seed. What really intrigues me, and this is just a complete tangent, I'm sorry, Simon, but on some of the older papers, cod liver oil was actually a therapeutic treatment for tuberculosis in people.
Was it really?
That was one of the. So you're not old enough to have been given cod liver oil at school, are you?
I'm not sure. I feel like I am.
Oh, you're just about. Did you have bottles of fortified milk as well? Okay, but we won't discuss which party removed that or which prime minister did. But yeah, no, it was, and this I found this fascinating going through, looking back, and we're talking sort of before the 19th century here now.
Right.
And tuberculosis or consumption in people was such a major thing. In all the workhouses. I mean, I'm not old enough. Clearly, I'd be dead by now if I was. But massive thing. And cod liver oil being enforced upon the children suddenly meant that the amount of death and mortality associated with TB reduced.
Yes, yeah.
Because their nutrition was better.
Yeah.
They had vitamin D.
Interesting, isn't it? Where do you?
It's like a 30% reduction in morbidity and mortality associated. And it was just like, and this obviously was why at the time it was touted as, oh my God, this is curing TB. It's like, you've just gone from having a really awful diet to giving them some vitamin D. And that singular change improved the health status of the population so much that TB now was much knocked down because people's immune systems were better, nutritionally was better. And this goes back full circle to what we're talking about diet with the birds. It's like, and like I say, you put it into a Google search. God, why did I say that? It is a paper, but it is a genuine paper, some genuine papers back from then. And that's why cod liver oil was touted and rained out across everybody, was because it just was a very easy fix at massively improving the nutritional status of growing children. Yeah. And that's why you had it at school.
You can see, and it worked. You're passionate about this. Is your passion, isn't it? Really, you can.
I love it. It's just when I went through and found these papers, brilliant. These guys from 100 years ago saying this cures tuberculosis has no impact on tuberculosis, but has a massive impact on your human health and your immune system, and that's why it was the cure for TB. And obviously, it did have a massive impact, but it was good nutrition.
Brilliant. Is there anything else we can? Because we will investigate this. This will be one of our Haith things here. So you're going to challenge us to look at this side-iron as well. Where do you stand on grit in diets?
Okay, well, grit's not needed for the small citizens. They don't need that to facilitate indigestion. We do see birds that just ingest a lot of it and get a grit impaction occasionally. So yeah, grit's not needed. For me, it's like nah. They don't need it. Okay, it depends on whether it's soluble or insoluble grit, and people obviously we were looking at more soluble grit for calcium content and uptake as well. And as I said, from a pet bird point of view, adding in UV enables them to make their own vitamin D and absorb calcium more effectively. So that's a very easy fix for pet owners. And then when you're dealing perhaps with larger breeding birds where you perhaps do need to have a complementary food like a soft food for breeding pairs, and obviously then you've got to look at things like calcium going into that as well. So, there is a whole thing you can do, but yeah, grit's not necessary. I'm sorry, Simon, because I know you have these products there, and people do use them. I'm not saying they don't, and I've got no objection in people using them at all. But I guess what you've got is you're relying on say cuttlefish, for example, where we know birds have a variable intake. Is if you're relying on that as your calcium source, but birds will take it variably, that's difficult. Now, I'd argue with you that if you're giving cuttlefish, millet sprays, iodine nibbles, or whatever else you're doing, or grit, well, there is an element here of it's not just diet, it is environmental enrichment as well. How you consume your food, how you take it. It's like the whole experience going to a restaurant is just not about the food, it's how it's presented and everything else that brings to that experience. So a lot of these things that people feed, fine, because they're different, they're stimulating, there's something to engage with. They taste differently, you have to eat them differently. Brilliant from an environmental enrichment point of view. And okay, yeah, they will have some nutritional benefit. But if you put other things in place, you're trying to account for that variation in diet such that you're not reliant upon it.
Okay, so it's the reliance that is it the reliance in grit that's the problem, or the grit? I think I'm going to have to get you and Professor Cooper, to chat this out in a scientific way, fathom out.
I'll lose
and find some way forward, because he's a definite. He feels that grit is part of the diet, should be an essential part of the diet, and he goes into length about the gizzard and so on. And I think his argument is a good one, which says that without it, you're not extracting the maximum benefit of that seed diet without the grits. But okay. I think I'm going to leave it to you scientists to fathom out what the solution is.
I guess what John is looking at, and he is right, is your gizzard in any citizene is a grinding organ. Okay, and the point for that as a grinding organ is you take your seed in, the gizzard grinds it to maximize a nutritional benefit. And there is a mechanical element here that grit will facilitate that. And birds naturally will consume grit or soil or sand, okay, geophagy. If you put that into a search, you'll find that macaws go mad for soil at certain places to get their sodium intake increase, etc., etc. So there is an element here that John is right in that grinding food is important to get the best nutritional benefit out of that. And grit will facilitate that process. I guess the nuances is what sort of grit and how much do you need and all the rest of it, and how often do you need it? Do you want to have access to it daily? Do you give it once a week? Do you give it once a fortnight? But you're talking now not from a nutritional point of view. You're talking from a functional point of view of aiding digestion in the digestive tract, and that's, I guess, a valid point.
Yes.
On that basis, and yeah. Maybe the studies aren't there to say that here's a bird fed on Haith that doesn't have grit, here's a bird that's fed on Haith that has grit. Look at the nutritional uptake. The absorption of nutrients is better on a bird with a grit-based diet. Certainly, I think people that are feeding grit these days, it tends to be intermittent. It's sort of like, I'll do it once a week in a little bit.
I think you're right. And what would be brilliant, though, is I think this is where you are with this. You're saying, look, the door's open. Let's talk about these things, and then perhaps by getting you and Professor John Cooper to chat together, you can answer some of those questions. How often, and we can maybe between us, not me because I'm not a scientist, but maybe between us, we can come up with something that actually becomes a best practice.
Well, I think that's where the UKBC is also pitching as well, Simon. Is we're trying to, there's lots of things that we don't know. There's lots of differing opinions on what is right, what is wrong, etc., etc., and people will be obsessed with what is right and wrong, and sometimes it's not. It's just a very fluid thing. But you're right. It's about getting recommendations that you can say, yeah, this is something I would recommend that we do. This is based on our current knowledge and experience, what we feel is the most appropriate message to get out.
Yeah.
And it's getting a consistent message out saying, we're going to do this. That's what we're going to do. And then obviously that, and again, this is a beauty with an online resources that we have for the UKBC is that can be changed. My recommendation in 2012 is different to what I'll be recommending in 2022. Of course it would be. So I can review that and change that. If you've got a book or you've got a DVD or you've got whatever you've got, what's on there is what's on there. It can't be changed. So the thing with the beauty of having the website that we have is everything that's being uploaded is current information and the current best practice. And like I said, I'm not against people feeding grit, don't get me wrong. But I guess the data isn't there to confirm that it is, I guess, improving uptake that significantly. Is it worth putting the effort into that? If that makes sense. If I had to,
that's a great question. That's the question we should put to John and both of you. Ply you with coffee, put you in a room, and then come out with the answer. I don't want to be in the room. I'll be outside making the coffees.
I think the honest answer is from a mechanical point of view, yes. In moderation, yes. Once a week or a fortnight, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's that. I think from a nutritional point of view, okay, maybe there is some calcium uptake and absorption, but it's difficult to be completely reliant upon that. And we do have other sources to get calcium in birds that are probably easier and more practical. So yeah, I think there's not necessarily hard and fast rules, but it's about exploring the opportunities that there are, thinking about it, and trying to come up with a consistent message across. And so yeah, this is the way forward that we're going to do. And, trying to, I guess, pitch things at a safe level that people can follow easily. Yeah. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Kevin, I know you've got a busy day, and you've been very kind to put some time aside for us today. And there's a lot of things to do. Can I just ask? I can't not ask this question. Where do I join this UKBC? How do I go? What do I do? What do I have to do?
So basically, we've I guess our main port of entry is the website, which is if you put in the UK Budgerigar Club onto a website search, you will find it. And obviously, then there's a joining page on the main website. So it's UKBudgerigar.club. Is the website. You can join there. That gives you access to all the resources that we've been building. You get access then to our social media groups as well, and obviously access to all the offers and deals that we've got secured for people to make their bird keeping as economical as we can. And the point is to try and get, as you said, it's from our point of view, it's partnering with companies that have a green ethos that we can trust and rely on their products and go, yep. As I said to you, it's getting the best quality seed there. We know there's limitations in seed alone, and that's real, but we know how to counteract that. So it's about being. I think that's different to what a lot of people's marketing would be, Simon, where it's like, oh, our seed is the best in the world, and that's what you need. And it's like, actually, yeah, but you've got to step back and look at welfare as a whole, and I think that's where you've got to be. I guess it's interpreting how people's branding and what they're pushing at you. And my perception from a Haith point of view is that you are very much, it's so much more than just let's increase our sales here. This is about education. It's about your green ethos. And like I say, and quality of feed that's coming through and all the rest of it. It's about getting that balance right. And there's lots of people out there that are just commercially interested in selling you stuff, and you're like, just stop it. Let's focus on what people need.
Thank you. It's really kind of you to say, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a positive difference. That's what our podcast is about, really. And it's been wonderful chatting to you, Kevin. It would be nice to catch up again with you and find out a little bit more about progress. I can see that membership is only going to go up, and we'll put something on the website. We'll put links, obviously, to the pages that you've already mentioned, and then anybody who hears the podcast or sees it on our blog can find their way to your website. And I love the idea of collating this information, and it's brilliant to be able to have a conversation with you about things that you're up to chat about. Let's find, if we don't know the answer, let's find out, and if we can help, if Haith resources can help, this is all for the good of birds, all for the good of animals, and it's for the good of people. It's good. If it's good for birds, it's good for us too. And I like that openness that you've, the way you've.
Well, I think so. And as the UKBC grows, and this is being perfectly honest, what we're actually building is building a resource and a data set of people and budgie owners. Do you know what I mean? That, if you want to ask hard questions about, well, what diet are you feeding, and how many of you are feeding grit, and what are you doing with it, and how many are you giving iodine, and all this sort of type thing, and how many of you are weighing your birds, and what does your bird weigh, and all this sort of type thing. There's so much information that you can get by building this sort of community that you can look at and go, okay. And one example, which I did a couple of years back with one of my students here, was we just went on to basically finding out data about what medications people are using and why they're using it and what they're doing and what dose they're using and where they're getting them from. And it's that sort of data that you can look at and go, okay, that's part of the education gap that I guess you can data mine those individuals, the best in the world, and say, okay, what is happening? Where are the deficits? What things do we need to target? And again, it's those simple things to have a massive impact on bird health and welfare, and subsequently their owners' enjoyment and mental health and everything else as well. Perfect.
Thanks, Kevin. I think it's a good place to leave it. So I'll just say thank you. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks to all our listeners. I'm Simon King. This is Nature Space with Haith, and we've been talking to Dr. Kevin Eatwell, who's a veterinary specialist, but also on the management committee of the UKBC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon.